here we're starting now to enter into really the new social media, and media is ubiquitous, so it's everywhere now. Like you said, we no longer have the opportunity to correct or to prevent things. We actually have, we're just dealing with the news channels. The question is, can you explain the process and impact of user-generated media? This is a topic that always gets put in, particularly in BCM and operational risk, is how are we dealing with the social media, the user-generated media versus the big-time news channels?
So, go back 5 years ago, right? When I worked on this area, and I would have, let's say, a small B2B company that nobody has ever heard of, people would walk up to me and say, that was really nice and interesting, but has no relevance for my business. That's over. So in an area where user-generated and social media is now playing the role that they're playing, everybody has a reputation management challenge. I mean, you can be a dentist in New York, and you have a reputation management challenge right now. So it has made this a concern for everybody. Now, that's number one. Number two, of course, it means I have even less control, because previously I could reach out and build relationships with journalists, still important, but how I'm controlling this is much more difficult. So what that requires, right, is that for many more companies, this is now a problem, and it's a more severe, more permanent problem. Now, when you think about managing it, right, this reputational terrain that I've been talking about, audience interest and societal significance, that applies to social media as well, because types of things that will have particular resonance in the social media space are things that generate audience interest and have societal significance, because they create more emotional and they create emotional responses and responses that are more advocacy or position driven, right? Where people take a particular view on something, right? Now, the thing you want to be careful when you think about social media, what's different between social media and the traditional media? The first thing is that not everything that goes on the social media is of relevance to you. Okay, so there's sometimes I see people, they have 1,500 issues at the same time. I think McDonald's gets 30 million tweets a day or something. I mean, but it's typically things like having a Big Mac right now. Okay, so most of that is noise, and what you have to be able to make a decision of what's noise and what's really important, and that's interesting, because if you think about it, what are the things that are really scary for a company in the traditional media world? Well, you make the front page of the New York Times. You find yourself on 60 Minutes, right? Something along those times. That's scary. Now, the equivalent of that in the social media space is, am I going to be on page 1 of Google if people type in my name, right? Then now you got a problem. So the equivalent of the headline or front page is now the front page of Google, right? Now that goes away. It has slightly different dynamics, but you want to think about, right, what is it really that captures people's attention, and how serious is this for me as a business? That still applies to social media as well. Now, what does that mean practically? It means that you want to, when you think about social media topics, you want to be able to evaluate that and have a capability in-house that's doing that. But then if it's not critical to you, it's not critical to your business, or it's just unlikely to catch on, you're just going to let it go, right? So one has to resist the urge to overreact in these situations too. Having said that, sometimes what you have now is that the traditional media picks up a social media story and then makes it a bigger story that now ricochets in the social media space. So you have a YouTube video, CNN talks about the video, then it becomes the most watched YouTube video the next week. Now you got a crisis.
Oh, yeah, problem. In your book, though, you mentioned user-generated media typically does in 3 to 5. I forget the statistic you had. It was like something like 3 to 5% generates from there. But the biggest role social media has is an amplifier of existing. Okay. So to your thought is keep an eye on it. Make sure you have some type of process to weed out the noise and use these tools, but watch the major media first and see how that percolates over to the social media.
It's still very rare. It's still very rare to have a social media crisis that does not involve the traditional media as an amplifier. It's still rare. It's not impossible, but it's still rare. That may change, by the way. If we talk next year, that may change. That's still the situation.